Hi, this is Gabrielle Stone, and this is Your Superior Self.
Gabrielle, I feel like I've known you my whole life. I just got done finishing your book. It's so weird how we do that, right? Like, especially when we pick up memoirs, and especially for me, I do a lot of interviews with people, and well, I don't get to read fascinating books like yourself. I think maybe one I did read. It was Alex Benayan, The Third Door. I don't know
Oh,
if
I'll
you've
have to
read
check
that.
that out. I have not.
It seems very not like obviously the story is very different, but the way that you read it and the way that you speak is very similar to the way he does. And
Mm.
I was like really taken back by one, your story, and two, your ability to be authentic and super honest.
Yeah,
So
I think memoirs are a special genre because, like you said, when you finish reading them, you feel, if they're written properly, you feel like you've gone on this journey with this person. The sequel that I wrote to this book, I even say in the intro, like, if you're reading this, you probably feel like we're best friends by now, because it's so true. You really like are able to connect with me and go on this journey with me, and it's been a really wild experience to see people's reaction to that and how they feel connected to me now. It's been really special.
sure. I mean, the honesty in it though, right? Like, I mean, it is your story and I'm sure you left some parts out, but it seems like you didn't because like you're really putting yourself out there. How intimidating was that for you?
It was a bit intimidating. I honestly, there's not much that's left out of that. And if it is, it's like boring, insignificant stuff.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons when I took it and shopped it to publishers, I took it to the big five and they were all like, it's too much. It's too in your face. We don't know if there's a wide enough audience, like all this bullshit. And some of them were like interested, but wanted me to tone certain things down. And I was like, no, like if I wanted to write some like beautiful, words strung together and poetic, I could have done that. But I wanted this book to feel like you were sitting down and having a glass of wine with me and going on this crazy like Netflix journey that I went on.
Mm.
So I wrote really like I was talking to whoever was reading it. Uh, when I decided I was going to publish this, I sent my mother the first draft in like its vomit form, and I will never forget. She walked into the room I was in and said, oh, sweetheart, are you sure you don't want to change your name or take out one of the men you slept with? And I was like, Mom, if I'm going to do this and put this out in a raw and authentic way, I have to include everything as it happened. People have to know, and I think they're going to relate to like the realness of it. And, lo and behold, they did. But yeah, I mean, of course, when you're putting your life out there in such a raw and vulnerable way, it's not nerve wracking.
Well, yeah, right. Like I don't know. Like you definitely put some details in there that your mom and you must have really like a really special relationship.
We do. We definitely do. Not all mothers could probably read about their daughters going through some of the things I went through in that book. I do know that my stepdad put it down when I got to Amsterdam and he was like, "Nope, not doing it." And I'm like, "Dad, can you just skip that part and like read the rest? Like it's a best-selling book. Like come on." And he's like, "No, I'm not doing it."
So Eat, Pray, FML is the title of this book, and it's a bestseller, right? How did your life change? And I know you're an actress, right? Following in your footsteps of your mom, who I love. But how did it change when this launched into the world?
It was really interesting how it happened because yes, I was working as an actress and had just started directing and producing. But at that time in my life, I was like, this is my career. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And then my personal life blew up into flames, which I'm sure we'll get into the actual story of the book. And I went on this life-changing journey to Europe, and it changed me as a human. Like I came home from that trip a completely different person in all of the best ways. And I wrote the book, and it did well when I released it in 2019, but in 2020 when COVID hit, I got onto TikTok begrudgingly because I was like, all these are like kids dancing and what am I going to do on this app? And lo and behold, I had a bunch of videos go viral, and it was the best marketing tool that I've had since. Um, and so when the videos went viral and the book really took off, it totally changed my life in a myriad of different ways. Financially, I was able to buy a house, which in California is like nearly impossible.
Yes.
And gave me the financial freedom to not have to take certain acting roles that, I was just doing for a paycheck, which I was so grateful for. But also, it changed my life in I now had this entirely different career. So I was now an author and had to get comfortable calling myself one. Um, that the books and the success of the books started my podcast, FML Talk. So it really like shifted my career in a really big way. Um, and the way that it changed my life is the messages that I've gotten over the years and still, get on a weekly basis from my readers who are thanking me for writing the book for whatever reason it spoke to them, like getting out of an abusive relationship or learning to love themselves or deciding they didn't want to be in the marriage that they were in. So many heartwarming and touching messages from people whose lives have been changed by reading my story. And that's incredibly special.
Hmm. And the sequel is your life after the trip.
Yeah. So Eat, Pray, FML goes from me finding out about my husband having an affair, um, and the relationship I got into after, and the entire crazy journey I end up going on in Europe. Uh, and it ends when I get on the plane to come home. So that's a complete like 3 month period of my life, if you can believe that all of that craziness happened over a span of 3 months. And the sequel, The Ridiculous Misadventures of a Single Girl, is the day I get home from Europe. So right when I get off the plane, and 2 years of my life after that. And the sequel, I didn't know I was going to write. It happened after the book came out, and everyone that finished it was like, what the fuck happened after Europe? Like, you can't just like not tell us. And because it was my life, it ended up being a saga in itself. So I did the sequel, and I think the sequel was actually harder for me to write than the first one. The first one, like, really just flowed out of me, and it was almost like therapy for me. The second one, I was writing about people who were still currently in my life. I had a relationship to protect at that point. It was a lot of very different emotions writing that book than the first one.
Mm. Yeah, like the first one, it just seems like, yeah, like you said, to your point, flowing out of you. The second one, like you said, a little bit harder because now you have this book that is this bestseller, right? And where do you go from there, right? Like I don't know. I mean, one one thing I do want you to do, right? And what I kept hearing in the book is how you had this quick timeline of like the cliff notes of your story. And I was very interested
Yeah.
about that because your story is like very dynamic and
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that you can easily spit out. But what is the cliff notes that I kept hearing
The
about
Cliff
in the
Notes.
book?
The Cliff Notes version of the story. And this is when people, when I was on the trip solo traveling, you meet so many people and they're always like, well, why are you on this trip? Because there's usually a reason, or how you ended up there. So I would get caught in these like conversations and I'd be like, okay, here we go, the Cliff Notes version. But more or less, I was married for almost 2 years, found out my husband was having an affair with a 19-year-old for 6 months, filed for divorce, left shortly after that, met a guy, fell madly in love with each other, and had this whirlwind romance. And he convinced me to go on a month-long trip to Italy with him. 48 hours before we were getting on the plane, he told me he needed to go by himself and broke up with me. And I was absolutely devastated, like, broke my heart like my ex husband never could have done. And I was like, well, I can either stay at home heartbroken or I can go travel Europe for a month by myself. So I took a backpack and I did 6 countries over the span of a month and wrote Eat, Pray, FML about it. Obviously, I would say on the trip talking to travelers, I'd say, and I'm writing a book about it. If you hang out with me long enough, you might be in it. But yeah, that was the Cliff Notes version.
Oh man, what was your favorite, like in writing that book? Like, what was your favorite part? Like, obviously, it's a hard piece to write, but what was what was your favorite part in that trip?
Oh God. I think each country I went to brought something different. I really loved taking the trains. Like, I remember I took the train from Paris to Barcelona, and it was like a 6 hour train ride. And I just sat and wrote chapter after chapter. And I was writing all of this like by hand in my leather journal. So it was really therapeutic to be going through something so heavy and having the thoughts in your head literally come out of your hand onto the paper. There's a very spiritual kind of like letting go in that. I think that's why people journal. Um, so that was really special to be able to experience healing in that specific way.
Hmm.
But I think if we're talking about like favorite place that I ended up on that trip, Barcelona just totally
Yeah.
took my heart, and the people that I met there really were a big part of that as well.
Mm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of places to go with my wife, and just listening to your trip. Like, what I love is that you really dive into like each individual culture and country and talk about your experiences there with the food and the people. And I really loved it. I heard New Zealand is like off the charts. I've never been there, but I've heard great things about it.
So I went to New Zealand when I was 6 years old. I obviously don't can't speak on it from an adult perspective, but I have very fond memories of it. Even though it was kind of a tumultuous time in my family's life, my mom was filming a movie called The Frighteners, directed by Peter Jackson, who of course did like all the Lord of the Rings and King
Hmm.
Kong. Um, and we were over there to be with her for filming, her and my nanny and myself. And then we came back. And when we came back, my mom was still in New Zealand shooting. That was when my father passed from a heart attack. Um, and it was pretty traumatic. I walked in to like wake him up for morning cartoons and found him on the floor in the bathroom.
Jeez.
My mom had to fly home the next day. Kind of like got all the affairs in order, and then we had his celebration of life, got back on a plane and flew back to New Zealand for her to finish the movie. um, I think that was my first kind of example of how to be a badass and handle shit when life explodes in front
Mhm.
of you. um, and but still, even through all that, New Zealand was such a memorable experience, even at such a young age. Like I remember how beautiful it was, how kind the people were. I do think it's not the cheapest.
Mhm.
I could be completely inaccurate on that, but I do feel like I've heard that. Um, if you're looking for somewhere to go where you can kind of like ball out on a budget and have a really authentic experience, Thailand was like
Yeah.
my
Funny enough, I
go-to.
went there in college,
Oh, really?
a month, yeah, a month with my buddy. He came in for an exchange student my senior year and kind of lived with us. And then his family, they're very appreciative and grateful, and they're like, "We'll pay for you to come over here." So I went over there for like a month,
Oh,
like with
cool.
like with like $150 in my pocket. Like it was like one of those. I can't believe I did that. I was 20 years
Yeah.
old. I was in college. Like I wasn't able to drink legally here, but went over there for like a month. Like seriously, with $150 in my pocket, they took care of everything, and I still can't believe I did it. It was like a 24-hour flight.
Yeah, it's
We
brutal. It's a brutal flight.
Yeah.
Although New Zealand is too. New Zealand's a long ass plane ride.
Um, but you're married now, right? Like I think I saw on Instagram you're like in Hawaii with your husband now and hanging out and having a good time.
I'm engaged. We got engaged in June recently
Hmm.
in Europe. So we took a 2 week trip to Italy, and he proposed there, which was very full circle because that's where my journey was supposed to start when I took my Europe trip initially. Um, so for all of my readers, when we shared it online, it was very like I felt like they were celebrating with me, and it was very
That's
cool.
it's not Javier, is it?
Oh my God, no.
I
I mean,
don't know.
you'd have to read the sequel to, get the details on who it is, but no, it's not Javier.
Is
But
Javier invited to the
people
wedding?
ask that all the oh my God, no. Big no. But again, you would when you if you read the sequel, you'll kind of see how that relationship plays out, and you meet who I end up with, although it was not an easy journey to get to where we're at now. But I don't think if we wouldn't have gone through all the things we did, we wouldn't be as strong as we are now. But I think that's why the second book was a lot harder for me to write, because there's things in the sequel that I'm not necessarily proud of. And there's nothing in Eat Pray FML that I'm ashamed about. Like I mean, I guess maybe the one night stand, but like not really. Like we've all done that and like learned a lesson from it. But there's things in the sequel where I'm like, ooh, this is not fun to open up and write about. And I had a partner to now protect his feelings. And although he knew everything I was writing about, it's different when you have to sit down and read that. Um, but I still had to be authentic and honest and include everything for, to do myself justice and my readers.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's it's got to be like I'm just thinking from a standpoint of a spouse, right? Like your boy loves you to death, right? And supporting you and like having to, because I know, with my wife and I, like, I'm just getting to the point now where it's like, we're having those conversations and I don't have that. We've been married 10, 11 years. And like, sometimes it's like you have those program responses to things. Like she might say something about an ex-boyfriend or something. I'm like, huh? And then
Mm-hmm.
like for you to have your, you guys are
My
getting
whole
married.
career.
Yeah. Well, you have that story, right? And it's so, like,
Yeah.
to your point, it's very intimate and it's very honest and it's very raw. And then for him to be so, he has to be super secure in who he is and what your relationship is. The foundation of that has to be super strong for someone to be able to read that and, like, you know what I mean? Like it's tough.
Yeah. I think there's maybe 5% of the population who could be in a relationship and have their journey and story written about in a very public way, and be so not okay, which he is, but also so incredibly supportive of your partner when literally they talk about their exes 5 days a week. Like, it's my job. I'm always on podcasts, I'm always doing interviews, I'm always answering questions. Like, it's constant. And I he came on a couple episodes of my podcast, and we of course got that question, like, how does he deal with that? And he was like, it pales in comparison when I see how many people she's helping with her books.
Mhm.
Like, it makes all of it feel so much bigger than an ex. And like, they're different. If I was just talking about my ex-husband, like, it wouldn't be that big of a thing. The guy after Javier, that one's a little closer to home, which people will read about in the sequel why that is. But yeah, I mean, we've gone to therapy, which I'm an advocate of and think everyone should do. It's helped us tremendously, just talk through things and be able to make sure our foundation is strong and that each other is the most important. But he's also, in the top 2 percentile of men on the planet. So I also just got lucky in that sense.
That's awesome. In the book, you talk a lot about self-love, right? And some of the stuff that you were doing, like giving your power away, and the way that you were kind of dealing with a lot of the trauma in your life. You talk about that, which I thought was fascinating. You uncovered that through a process called the thought onion, which,
Mm-hmm.
as a psych student myself, like going back to school, like I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Um, but
I
yeah, the
get
thought.
asked all the time what therapist I picked that up from. I'm like, no, I came up with that on the streets of London. Although I'm sure there's other people that use that process and call it something different. But
What's the latest thought onion that you've unraveled?
oh God, way to put me on the spot, but with also such a great fucking question. Um, well, okay. Oh, we recently were just in Hawaii. His daughter from his first marriage lives out there with her mom. We all have a really great relationship. Like, it's probably the easiest co-parenting triangle on the planet. Um, and I adore his daughter. However, when I came into their life, she was 5 years old, turning 6.
Hmm.
And that's the age I was when I lost my dad.
Oh,
And so it was very like, the universe orchestrates that shit for us to heal, right? Like, it's not just coincidence. Um, Tay, my fiance, also has a lot of qualities that my dad has. Even my mom has been like, their energy is similar. He's older than I am. Like, there's a lot of things that just like play into the trauma of me losing my father. Um, And we were in Hawaii recently, and his daughter was like begging him to sleep with her that night. And normally it's like not a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, like go cuddle, whatever. Like I'll starfish on the bed. But I must have been in some type of mood or some type of feels. Hawaii always has like a way that like it brings stuff to the surface. And I had a weird reaction to it and was like, for lack of better terms, like, fuck this chick, dude. Can like you just come snuggle with me? I'm sad. I want like some love tonight. And I stopped myself. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, there's something deeper. So, for people that are listening, the thought onion is really like a way that you can look at your thoughts and your reactions that you're having and take a step back and kind of dissect them in a step by step way so that you can get to what's at the root and what's causing them so you can then have different reactions or thoughts in the future. Um, so, for example, when you have your initial thought or reaction, that's called the superficial thought. And that's like your knee jerk, like in the moment, how you decide to react or don't decide how it comes out. And under that is the authentic thought. And that's kind of like, what's the emotion that I'm feeling inside of me that caused that thought in the first place? And the subconscious thought, which is like the third layer, that's usually a long stemming trauma or a subconscious belief, something that's been with you for a long time, that if you can get to that layer, you can be aware of it and adjust it and heal it in order to change your thoughts or your reactions in the future. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, let's thought onion this bitch. And the initial, obviously superficial thought was like, why the fuck can't she like leave her dad alone and let him come sleep with me? Like he should be sleeping with me anyways. She's 10. This is silly. Um, the authentic thought would be, I feel like I'm not chosen. Like that was the feeling inside that caused that initial thought. And the subconscious thought was, dad's leaving me.
Oh,
Obviously, like he's not my father. I'm fucking aware of this. Like it's not a creepy relationship like that. But the 7-year-old little girl in me who very much still exists, like people talk about inner child work all the time. It's so important. If you haven't healed certain parts of you, there's a little girl or boy inside of there kicking and screaming, being like, yo, bitch, like, pay attention to me. And that little 7-year-old was going, dad's leaving and abandoning me again, which
oh,
of course, like, is so not what was happening on a surface level. But then I was able to understand why I was having that reaction. And for me, all I did was like take a moment. I probably put some calming music on and went in my mind's eye, went in to talk to my 7-year-old little girl and say, hey, Gabrielle, like, I just want you to know that everything's okay. You're not abandoned, even if, dad did leave, whether he chose to or not. Like, I'm always going to be here for you. You're always safe. You're always protected. And really, like, have a conversation with your inner child. That's one of the biggest tools my mom as a healer has taught me, that's really helped me address some of the trauma that has been with me from that age.
mm, I love that. Yeah, I've done that a couple of times, and it is very powerful. Like I see the little boy that was me, right, and like hugging him and saying that he's worthy and that he's
Yeah.
enough, and like, because like I do have issues with like trying to go above and beyond to prove my worth, right? And when
Mm-hmm.
you have that self-love conversation, like as long as you like you mentioned it at the end of your book about really loving yourself and valuing um, that version of yourself. You talk about the love cocktail
Yeah.
and how we can love ourselves every day, and that I wasn't doing that for the longest time. Like
Mm.
I would just superficially go out into the world and just try to be the best version that I could possibly be for them, not for me. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was very empty, right? Like, I mean, we do that every day in our lives when we try to show up and, be superficial about our feelings and not being authentic with how we feel with others and communicating that.
Yeah.
Dive deep, go inside, talk to that child. Because a lot of it is, the child work or whatever you want to call it. It's the small child inside of us, like begging for attention. And,
Totally.
like to
Totally.
your point.
And for people that, listen and like maybe you're like, "Oh, that's a little too woo-woo for me." Like if you're not making enough money, like look at what your little child saw growing up. Did not enough money equal mom and dad were never there because they were trying to work all the time. Like there's always going to be a reason for blocks and walls that you're hitting in your life. So for me, like I had a fear of abandonment since my dad died. Not that like he chose to die and abandon me, but when you're 7 and you're like, oh, dad died, the people I love die, fear of abandonment. I then, my high school sweetheart, when I was 18, died in a car crash. So that was like that same wound being ripped wide open and fear of abandonment. So I was walking around the world with this fear of abandonment, attracting people into my life that were going to show me that belief that I had so I could then look at it and be like, oh, I need to fix that. So what did I do? I attracted my husband who abandoned me in the most heinous way possible by cheating on me. And the universe was like, okay, Gabrielle, are we ready to look at this and heal this? I was like, no, I'm good, thanks. And then I attracted a man into my life who quite literally, like in an almost laughable, ironic way, abandoned me 48 hours before we were getting on a flight. And the universe was like, okay, are we ready now to go heal this? And I'm like, all right, I guess we'll go try. And in fixing that abandonment belief and that fear of abandonment, only then was I able to attract someone like my current partner who would never abandon me in that way, um, because I no longer had that belief. So when there's patterns of things happening to you, like I get messages all the time from people saying every relationship I get into, I get cheated on, or I keep getting broken up with, or I can't get this job. I get to the last person and then they pick the other candidate. Um, those are all things that feel very unfair and feel like, why is this happening to me? And that don't seem like they're your fault. And I'm not saying like you're a bad person, but I'm saying like when there's patterns in your life, point the finger back at yourself because there is an unconscious belief that you need to fix. And once that is cleared, a lot of shit will start opening up for you.
Mhm. How did you realize that, right? I know your mom's a healer. I've listened to a lot of your mom's like interviews with different people. And she seems, you talk about the universe, consciousness, going inside. Like, did she help you develop that in you?
Oh, hugely. So for people listening, my mom is Dee Wallace. She's an actress. She was the mom in E.T., Cujo, The Howling. My dad was also an actor when he was alive and a director as well. And he was actually the one that first, this was like back in the day, obviously, brought her The Secret and was like, all into manifesting and spirituality. Like my mom always tells the story that my dad would see a breakdown for a role and it would be like a short, fat woman. And he'd be like, no, I love this role. I'm going to make this my role. And he would end up like convincing the casting directors that like obviously it should be written for him. Like really into the manifesting stuff. But it wasn't until my dad passed. It was a couple months after that, my mom, and this is like me telling her story, obviously, was in their bathroom and like in a moment of grief, like dropped down to her knees and was like, I need to figure out a way to not feel this anymore. I need to learn how to heal myself. And she got a message in her, like she heard a voice, and this is sounding so woo woo, guys, stay with me. She heard a message, and since then she started becoming a healer, diving into her healing work. She's a clairaudient channel, so she hears messages, and tests with like a pendulum and is able to clear subconscious blocks and really get to insane stuff that would take years and years of therapy within 30 minutes. So I've grown up with her developing this work. It's a blessing 99% of the time. There is the time where I'm like, I just want to call and complain, mom, like stop telling me how to fix my life and what I need to heal. But it's life-changing work that has really guided me in my life. I've seen it change so many of her clients' lives. I've seen it in real time change my life. And it really has created like my grounding in spirituality for sure.
Mm. Do you like, so you keep saying woohoo, right? And I love woohoo, right? And do you bump up against that resistance? Like when you're promoting like your book and you're getting like some of the markets that aren't necessarily open to that kind of stuff? Do you feel kind of awkward, or do you feel kind of like you have to tiptoe a little bit?
Um, I don't know. Not with the book. I mean, I don't think there's anything in the book that people are like, whoa, this is really out there. I actually took a chapter out of the sequel because I did fear that. And I ended up releasing that chapter on my Patreon subscription one season. And everyone was like, why did you take this out of the book? This is fucking awesome. And it was basically where I went to a healer and did a past life regression.
Mm.
And in that past life regression, it was me and Javier, and I was his mother.
Oh.
And it was like, and obviously, like breaking a mother son bond is really intense. If you've had a past life with someone in any capacity, if you've had a past life with someone. But it started to make so much sense why I couldn't just like get over this breakup that,
Mhm.
was not even that long of a relationship. Um, so I don't know if there's anything in the first book where I feel like, ooh, are people going to hang with me through this in the woo-woo sense? I mean, I'm very woo-woo in my life. Like my whole podcast, I talk about like manifesting and creating what you want and owning, your spirituality and stuff. But I don't know if apart from that one chapter that I did take out, I don't know if there's anything that I feel I bump up against necessarily.
Well, yeah, the book isn't really like there's a couple of like meditations and things like that, but there's nothing really like to your
Yeah.
point, woohoo. I mean, like when you're talking or something like that, and like there are mentions about your mom being a healer, and I guess they kind of, I don't know. I feel like this manifesting is like kind of getting mainstream now. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as like consciousness and the universe, and you're actually creating this for yourself, right? Like everything that you're experiencing, there's something inside of you. Like to your point, that the
Yeah.
subconscious is projecting into your reality. um like I'm causing everything, right? Like you eat like the good stuff and the bad stuff, and some people don't want to own that. They want to think that something's happening to them, right? Like
Yeah.
the universe is doing this to me, and I'm not doing it to myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like the woohoo stuff is just like old stuff that is like everybody's just coming on to now. Like I feel like this has
Right.
been
Like
taught for like,
remembering.
yeah,
Yeah.
remembering.
Starting to wake up to.
Remember, that's a great analogy. Like remembering, like that's 100%, because the past life regression stuff, like I just got turned on to like Dolores Cannon like 3 months
Mm-hmm.
ago, and like I'm like, oh my god, like I'm reading all of her books, and I'm
Yeah,
just
my
like,
mom
yeah.
worked with her a lot.
Yeah, she's actually on one of the episodes that I listened to.
Oh,
But
nice.
it's funny though, because we were talking about synchronicities, with just what I've been experiencing with just reading your book. Like you talked about in the book that you were reading The Alchemist and the Four Agreements, and I literally had those two books on my desk right now. And I was driving today, listening to the very end of your Audible book, and I'm like thinking to myself, like I would be so interested in learning about a past life with her and just seeing where she
Mm.
came from. And then you just mentioned that, and I'm like,
Oh, I love
I'm
that.
kind of I'm kind of having like a moment right now. I'm just like, you put it
Yeah,
out to the universe, and it delivers.
I love that. So I just had this woman on my podcast. It hasn't aired yet and won't for a couple months, but she basically does soul readings. So she'll look at your name, and each letter in your name has like a number, and then she'll read a whole chart based off of that. And I brought her on, and we start like getting into all of the, what happens before we get to this life. And we were talking about this analogy, which I absolutely love, that it's like everybody's up in, whatever, heaven, universe, whatever you want to call it. We're all up there hanging out and getting ready to come down, and a bus pulls up. And it's like, oh, this is my bus. I'm ready. I'm going down, guys, everybody. And you're like, okay, I need a person that's going to absolutely break my fucking heart and make me go on this crazy journey. Who wants to volunteer to do that? And some soul up there is like, I love you enough to be that villain in your story. Like, I'll go and I'll do that for you. And he gets on the bus. And someone else is like, okay, I need someone that's going to teach me this, this, and this. And they're like, ooh, I'll be that person. And they get on the bus. And I think there's a lot of toxic positivity out there when people are like, everything happens for a reason. It's going to be fine. I so wholeheartedly believe everything happens for a reason. Like, I'm a walking fucking example of that, but not in the just brush it off and always be happy way, but in the, if you can look at things in that analogy, like the people that fuck you over in life are really here to teach you some giant lesson, and it's going to change you as a person and make you a better person, even if you can't see that reason in the moment and in the hurt of it. Knowing that it will eventually become clear to you in that way gives you so much peace dealing with things on a day to day,
Mm,
in my opinion.
sure. It's like when you're pulled into that though, you can't see it. Like when you're all into the feels, like when you're in,
Oh yeah,
you just
no,
can't
it
see that.
takes a while. But for the comment about little signs and synchronicities, she was like, when someone's here on a soul contract to like help you in a certain way in your life, the universe will sprinkle in signs that like you can't fucking ignore. So like
Sure.
in my example, when I met Javier, he was like, "Yeah, I'm going on this Europe trip. You have to come with me." And I was like, "You're fucking crazy. When are you leaving?" And he was like, "September 4th," which would have been my 2-year wedding anniversary. And I'm like, "Okay, when are you coming home?" And he says, "October 4th," which is my late father's birthday. So that was all I needed. And I was like, "All right, I guess I'm going to Europe." The universe is like, "Bitch, get on the plane." So, like, it was things like that. And she's like, "Those are things that are predetermined that are going to ensure that you follow the path that you're supposed to be on." And I
Sure.
thought that was really cool.
No, that is cool because I was struggling a little because I just got back from LA probably a month ago and I didn't know why I was out there, right? Like, I had an opportunity to participate in some healing energy work, and it's totally outside my comfort zone, right? Like, my wife, she's, you know, anything longer than 2 hours on a flight, she's like, I'm not doing it, right? Everything aligned for us to go. Like, I mean, I was seeing signs, I was seeing, you know, like the white rabbit from the Matrix, right? The comment
Mm-hmm.
about follow the white rabbit, like that had come up in the conversation with the person that I went out there to go see. And like every day after that, I saw a white rabbit somewhere, right? Like, it wasn't even Easter time. And I was just seeing a white rabbit. And um, they had mentioned that they had done some work with a particular college, and I would see that college everywhere. I would see license plates, like California license plates. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore. Like, I counted one day, I saw like six, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
like what is going on right now? I guess I'm supposed to go. So I go out there and I do the healing. LA's like amazing. I think it's the first time out on the West Coast. We stayed in Santa Monica
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a great place to experience the West Coast.
for the first time.
Yeah.
I went to Venice, went to Manhattan Beach. We saw Hollywood, went down to Beverly Hills, and just did the tour stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, wasn't really feeling the vibe of, of the healing and stuff. Didn't know where that was taking me. Did that. I'm thinking, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm out there on Santa Monica Pier with my wife. I'm like, all right, God or universe, like, I'm here. Like,
Show
what's
me
next?
why.
Part the sea. Come on, man. And no, I got a couple of really cool sunsets, and I had a great conversation with Julia Cannon the next day at the hotel. Like, we had set up a call to kind of talk about her coming on the show and hanging out and talking about past life regressions. But after that, it's just kind of like, I don't know. And maybe the universe is just, that was like kind of seeing like what I'm willing to follow, like
Mm.
what am I going to do out here?
Or
Maybe.
maybe the fruits of whatever was planted in LA aren't here yet, you know?
Sure, sure.
I
Because
think sometimes we get so caught up on like that instant gratification that, to me, like looking back on some things that I've been working on manifesting or things that like I've been pulled to do, um, I forget about. And then months down the road, I'm like, oh shit, like this was because of that and wouldn't have happened if I didn't do that. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, the instant gratification gets us. Like, we want everything right now.
Well, sure. We're like, I'm flying to LA. Fucking heal me. Fix my
Heal
life.
me, heal me, fix my life. Show me the sign. Come on, hook me up with something. Come on. Then you get back, and it's just like, oh, you know,
Nothing's changed.
yeah. Here you go. Here's some more stress and anxiety in your life.
Yeah, I know
um,
that all too well.
I know, right? But it's. I guess the frustration is just, we get so caught up in our shit, and we have to, for me, it's just, you know, as you awaken to the universe, as the universe, awakens you a little bit, it's kind of like you want to see what else is out there. There's a curiosity. It's like, well, shit, if I'm seeing this and I can do this, if I can manifest this trip, like what else
Mm,
can I do? Like what else can we do as human beings, as
yeah,
consciousness, as part of the source?
totally. I think people that are interested in, working on manifesting things, the biggest lesson I've learned in it is that you have to put your order in and decide very specifically what you want and like do whatever, meditating or magnetizing or whatever exercises you're going to do. And then to some extent, let it go, which is the hardest part because it's usually stuff that you want so fucking bad and not be married to the way that it shows up. So, for example, when I released Eat, Pray, FML, I can't even tell you, probably for like 3 or 4 months, every night I went to bed and was like working on, okay, a celebrity's going to read this book. They're going to post about it on Instagram and then it's just going to take off like wildfire. Like that was how it was obviously going to happen in my brain. Never in a million years, if someone was like, actually, no, you're going to get on this like child's app called TikTok and it's going to blow up and you're going to do it by videos that you make, I would have been like, what? No, sure as shit, So, like, putting in what you want and then not being attached to the way it shows up. Um, I mean, I've been working on recently manifesting something super big that's just coming to fruition to the point where like it's so new I can't even talk about it yet. But I had a
uh
very I know, sorry to leave you hanging on that. Very specific way that I thought it was going to go. I had it like with the best people, like it was all set for like, this is the path that it should take. And lo and behold, I got a DM on Instagram from someone that saw my TikTok, and that is the whole way that it started, like,
so visualization, feeling the emotion and then
yeah.
letting it go.
My biggest thing is like going to your love place. So like that can be your dog or your kid or like whatever like really makes your heart happy and feel good on the inside. And you go to that place and kind of like daydream about what it would be like to be in that moment. So as if it's already here, as if it's already happened, as if you're like, accepting the award for what you're trying to create. Um, Really like being in the present. I've also been doing an exercise that like I've seen wild results from where you go to that love place and you visualize like magnetizing the people that you would need to help you get there into your energy field. So you're like drawing in, let's say if like you're in the business and you're like, I'm attracting all the directors and casting directors that are really going to like see my authenticity and want to work with me. And attracting all of those people into your energy. That's been a really powerful tool for me lately.
Hmm. Any individual that you attracted that you were like, holy shit, like this really does work?
Oh, yeah. Like the biggest of the big that I needed for this specific. I'll tell you about it when we stop recording.
When we stop,
Um,
yes, when I hit stop.
yes. But yeah, I mean, it, the work when you can believe in it and do it and then let go and not be so like chokehold on the outcome can be really powerful.
Mhm. Wow. Do you teach that? Like I know you have a Patreon. Do you do any of that with that?
No, I mean, I talk about this off and on the podcast. We've definitely like touched on this stuff before. On the Patreon, I do like mini bonus episode seasons, and there's one season that's all on healing. And there's a lot of this in that. Um, but no, there's nowhere where I like specifically teach this. I think maybe because so much of it feels like I've gotten it from my mom. So I'm like, am I just like teaching her shit at this point? But like, she's like, look, you connect with a whole different audience that is going to hear everything in a totally different way. She's like, so spread the word.
Do you have the same, like, do you feel like you have the same ability? Well, I personally believe that we all have those types of abilities. Like your mom, are you like opening up to that more for yourself?
um, it's so funny you asked that because she asks me all the time, like, why I don't want to kind of like expand into the work more. Like, I know how to work with a pendulum, and I I feel like what she calls messages, I'm more comfortable calling my intuition and
Mm-hmm.
guesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I have been told by a few, psychic and mediums that like I'm gonna kind of go into that at some point in my life. Um, but I'm not pulled to it right now. Like
Sure.
my way of helping people right now is like, with the books and the lessons in there and the podcast and more of like a this world helping. But maybe one day that'll change. I don't know.
Sure. The psychic that you had in your book, she was spot on, man. She was
If I could tell you how many messages a week I get saying, okay, everything's happened except the daughter at 33. When do you think that's coming? I'm like, guys. So yeah, she basically predicted my entire life. And at the time, um, I was still married, but like kind of finding out about some shady stuff and was like thinking maybe I might be getting divorced, but hadn't found all the big stuff out. And she kept saying in that session, she's like, I need you writing. I really need you writing. And at the time, I was just acting and directing. I'm like, I don't have any fucking ideas for a film script. Like, all right, dude, but like, okay. And it was like laughable when I realized, like, oh, I'm going to write the book. um, and she did say, I had her on my podcast in the first season. And I was like, sometimes mediums get messages or see visions that they explain one way, but then it later makes sense in a different way. Like my mom
Mhm.
and dad went to a psychic one time, and the woman was like, I don't know how to say this, but like I see you having an affair in front of your husband. And my mom was like, well, that's never going to happen. What are you talking about? And a year later, she was on stage doing Annie Get Your Gun, acting out a scene where she was having an affair, and my dad was sitting in the front row.
Wow.
So I brought that story up to her, and I was like, do you think maybe you saw me having my fiance's daughter like as like my step kid? And she was like, yeah, sure, if you want to, if that makes you feel better. I was like, what the fuck does that mean? So I'm 34 in November. I don't think we're gonna make the cutoff, but yeah, she was wildly accurate about like everything else.
Sure. Well, time's so weird. Like if you take it out of this reality, right? Like
Totally.
it's not even a thing outside of this physical reality. It's like time is nothing, right? Like every time you experience like flow states or anything in deep meditation, there is no time associated with it. So it's interesting how like when psychics say things, like I've had some really great psychics say some things to me. I try not to. I'd say don't give me a timeline because I don't want one. I don't want to stress about it, and I don't want to like doubt it. So
Yeah.
just don't do that because sometimes it's hard. Like I mean, time is a man created tool, and we put so much emphasis on it. Like I know I do with goals and
Oh
short term,
yeah.
long term. Like
And
it's
then we're doing exactly what we're not supposed to do, which is letting go and letting
mhm.
it come. We're like, okay, is it October yet? She said October. And it's like, no, no, no. Like you've got to chill and just let go. I've actually the good mediums that I have had sessions with have always said, this is what I'm seeing, but time is like not linear. So like this could be, I'm seeing the number 3, it could be 3 days or 3 years. Like it's very up in the air time wise.
That'd be interesting though to see you like come out, like build this foundation with your fan base, and then come out and start toying and developing those psychic skills, maybe, or like intuition, and like turn it into something totally different. That'd be
Yeah, and
interesting.
I'm open to wherever the roads are going to lead from what has been built thus far. And I think that anytime I've been super just like, okay, I'm open wherever the wind blows me, it takes me somewhere really good. So I try and consistently live like that. Although it's very hard. I'm a fucking insane control freak, and I always like I'm so impatient. I'm just like, let's go. What are we doing next?
Gabrielle, this has been amazing. Like I just, I could keep going all night. Thank you for taking the time. Like this really means a lot that you would take the time out of your schedule to come hang out with me on the show.
Thanks, dude. And thank you for taking the time to read the book. It's always such a better conversation when someone has, and I know everybody's really busy and doesn't necessarily have time to do that. And I love when guys go on that journey with me. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
I can never look at you the same.
Hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, right. How many words is that? Is the
How many
book?
words is what?
The
Oh
book.
God. I don't know off the top of my head. I know it's 280 pages, the first
Because
one.
it's like 9 hours on Audible. And I'm just thinking like
Yeah,
you hand wrote that? That's insane.
I did. I did. There were two chapters, like the divorce chapters, which I wasn't even originally planning on including. I was just going to be like, so my husband cheated, I got divorced. Then all this shit happened. And my girlfriends were like, no, 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 no. Like that was like an episode of CSI. You have to write about that. So that I wrote when I was back in LA, and typed, but the rest of it was written by hand.
Sure. So how
Still
can
got the
people
journal.
what's your website? Where can people find you?
It's eatprayfml.com, and we have all the merch for the podcast and signed books. You can also get them on Amazon or Audible. The first is Eat, Pray, FML, and the second is The Ridiculous Misadventures of a Single Girl. And I also have a self love healing journal that's called Fuck Off, I'm Healing. And it's kind of like a step by step guide to help you work through trauma and bullshit that you've gone through in your life and come out the other end.
Mm, eat, pray, fuck my life. Thank you so much, Gabrielle. This has been
You're
amazing.
so welcome. Thank you for having me.